Hello. It's time for Stories for the Heart, and today I'm going to be reading from this book, Chicken Soup for the Soul. It's all about the power of gratitude and how being thankful can change your life. Um, it's just a bunch of short stories contributed by authors from all over the place. And I thought, this being the month of November and the month of Thanksgiving, this would be appropriate. So I hope you enjoy. The first short story that I'm going to read is called 2 Seconds on the Microwave. And there's a little quote at the top that says, "He who loves with purity considers not the gift of the lover, but the love of the giver." And that's by Thomas A. Kempis. I have a touch of obsessive-compulsive disorder. Okay, perhaps it's more than a touch. I can be plain old neurotic. When I use the microwave at work and the person before me has not cleared it, leaving 45, 10, or even just 3 seconds on the timer, it annoys me. It's a silly thing, really, but it's inconvenient. Then I have to push reset prior to entering my desired amount of time. Besides, it's the principle of the thing. It should be cleared. When the same thing started happening at home, I was even more annoyed. My boyfriend John stops by to use my kitchen during his lunch break since he works right by my apartment building. A few weeks ago, I was about to put a bowl of soup in the microwave when I noticed there was a 2 on the screen, indicating that it had not been cleared after John had used it at lunch. Didn't he know these little things bothered me? I let it go and forgot about it until a day or two later when I noticed a 1 left on the screen. Day after day, there would be time left on my microwave. It wasn't a big enough deal to focus on it for more than a couple of seconds, and I honestly forgot about it quite quickly. But I still experienced a moment of, ugh, man, each time I discovered the microwave timer had not been cleared. Why was John doing this to me? Was he trying to push my buttons? Then the other day, I received my answer. John came over in the evening to have dinner with me. I was about to place a bowl of vegetables in the microwave when once again I noticed the 2. And finally, my opportunity to give him a little grief about his new bad habit arose. With what I hoped was a lighthearted smile, I said, "Hey, what's with you leaving time on the microwave all of a sudden and not clearing it when you're done? Are you trying to drive me crazy?" I wanted to use a playful, fun tone while also letting him know that I found his routine irritating. John's brow furrowed a moment and he looked confused. And then he explained, "If I press stop before the time is up, the microwave only beeps once instead of 3 times. I don't want to wake you. I had recently begun working the night shift and sleeping during the day, so while John was making his lunch in the kitchen, I was asleep in my bedroom at the other end of the apartment." I felt my face redden with embarrassment, and for a moment, I was speechless. Humbled, I walked over to where he was standing and wrapped my arms around him. I gave him a kiss and said, "You're a wonderful man." Now, when I see 2 seconds left on the microwave, it's a reminder to appreciate the thoughtful, caring man I am blessed to have in my life. And this was written by a lady named Savannah D. This one is titled, "In Thanks for What We Have." And the little quote at the beginning says, "Gratitude turns what we have into enough and more." And that was by Melody Beatty. I sat pensively and waited for Kathleen to speak. Being called to the Human Resources Department is a little like being called to the principal's office. But she was smiling, so I took that as a good sign. "Anne Marie," she said, "a food bank in Philly that serves the elderly is asking for help. Since it's almost Thanksgiving, I thought this would be a good company project to pursue. What do you think?" Sounds like a great idea, I said. What would you like me to bring? Well, she said, I'm sure whatever you donate will be appreciated, but that's not exactly what I had in mind as your mission. I'd like you to organize the event and see it through. Well, sure, I guess so. As I stuttered through my response, all I could think was, what? Why me? Great! I knew we could count on you, Anne-Marie. Good luck, and I know you'll do a great job. I walked back to my office without a clue as to where to begin. This was in 2009 when the U.S. economy was on life support and fading fast. Overtime at our company had been completely canceled. This rise in unemployment forced families of many of our employees to live on one paycheck when they had been accustomed to two. How could I ask my coworkers for more? That evening I drove home filled with negativity. Then I remembered a long time ago when the pickings were slim at our house, too. My mother often joked that it was never a secret to the neighbors when Dad was out of work, as it always coincided with the milkman skipping our house on his route. The Pennsylvania steelworkers went on strike regularly in the 60s, and milk delivery was always the first luxury to go. Then a new strike came along, and Mom wrote her customary note to Jim the milkman, asking him not to deliver any more milk until further notice. In the morning, Jim picked up the empty bottles, including the one with Mom's note, and left the usual gallon of milk. 2 days later, Jim picked up the empties and left 4 quarts of milk. Then he got back in his truck, and this time he wrote his own message on the flip side of Mom's. It read, "Kids need milk." Jim ran back to the porch and shoved the note down in between the bottles of milk. The strike went on for 3 months, and Jim left 4 quarts of milk every other day as usual, and never collecting a dime from us. Once the strike was over, the milk delivery continued as usual, and every week he collected, but only for the milk he had delivered the previous week. He never referred to the 3 months when he delivered a gallon every other day without charge. The memory of Jim's kindness went a long way to spark my enthusiasm. Maybe it wasn't a lost cause. These were hard times, but I invested all my hope in the kindness of the human heart. Perhaps I'd be in for a pleasant surprise. The next morning I posted signs about our food drive all over the cafeteria and on every bulletin board I could find. Each sign read, "Thanksgiving Food Drive to support the elderly poor of West Philadelphia. Donations of non-perishable food items are greatly needed." After I finished tacking up the signs, I gathered a few empty cartons from the mailroom and hoped for the best. I'd planned to send out a few reminder emails as we got closer to Thanksgiving, but that was never necessary. Instead, within a few days, I had to locate an empty office space to store the massive number of contributions we had accumulated. By the end of the week, I was recruiting volunteers to help me pack the mountains of bottles, cans, and boxes. I couldn't keep up with it by myself. One of my coworkers, Maggie, made the rounds with me every day from one department to another to pick up the canned goods and other items. Maggie was a bit past 60 years old, but pushed our food cart around with the energy of a woman half her age. She smiled her way through every pickup area, making a fuss over each item she placed in our cart. Everyone knew when Maggie was passing through. Her gratitude was so genuine that she inspired everyone to dig deep and help. As we were making our rounds one day, I asked her where she got all her energy and enthusiasm. "Annie," she said, "everyone in this building has a job. With the unemployment rate hovering at 10%, what's not to be enthusiastic about if we can help someone less fortunate? It's Thanksgiving, and I can't think of a better way to be grateful for keeping our jobs when so many have lost theirs, no matter how much overtime gets cut. Sure, money is tight, But when isn't it? But people need food. As I listened to Maggie, I could hear our milkman's words echoing in the background. Kids need milk. I witnessed a great return on my investment in the kindness of the human heart. It's a comfort to know that when times are tough, good folks chip in, if for no other reason than out of gratitude for the misery that they have been spared. Though our company is located in the suburbs, many of the 600 rank and file employees reside in Philadelphia. Through this annual event, I've witnessed Philadelphia's long-standing motto, the city of brotherly love, come to life every year. Our contribution grows annually in direct proportion to my gratitude for such boundless generosity. And this was written by Anne Marie B. Tate. I'll just read a couple more really short ones here. This one is called The Rumbling. And the quote says, "The past cannot be changed, forgotten, or erased. However, the lessons learned can prepare you for a brighter future." And the author is unknown. Most mornings at approximately 5:15, I was startled awake as the walls of my house began to tremble. The deep, rumbling vibrations were so strong that the windows rattled. Sharp bursts that sounded like firecrackers were followed by a deep bass throbbing sound again. It was my neighbor's Harley Davidson. Oh my goodness. Those bikes are often referred to as rolling thunder, and in the early hours of the morning, that was putting it mildly. My neighbor's bike typically idled, rumbling for about 5 minutes. In those 5 minutes, I lay awake in my bed, imagining what this neighbor was doing that required him to make my house shake for so long. I pictured him walking back into his house, pushing the start button on the coffee maker, and slowly stirring sugar and cream into his travel mug. Or perhaps he went back in to feed the dogs their morning meal, followed by a quick ear scratch for the pups and a goodbye kiss for his wife. Whatever the case, my daydreaming was usually followed by intense prayer that the rumbling would not wake my baby. Oh my goodness. I can identify with that right now with a baby living in my house. I have a confession. I had never actually met my neighbor or his wife. Our paths had not crossed in the busyness of life. I had seen them from a distance out the back windows in our comings and goings, but neither of us had ever taken time to have a conversation. Instead, for several years, I endured listening to his Harley, silently fuming in my bed. One morning, the rumbling magically disappeared. To my elation, I slept in. The baby slept in. For the entire week, my eyes opened to the peaceful sound of silence each morning. A few days later, a friend emailed me that my neighbor had died. I felt shock, confusion, and more than a bit of guilt. Through my back window, he had seemed so healthy. He did not look that old, and he was able to ride a motorcycle every day. Apparently, he had been sick for several years. My friend said he was the kindest man she knew, who kept living life to the fullest in spite of his illness. She added, "I know you might have been wondering why you have not heard his beloved Harley in a few days." Oh, the irony of those words. You see, I heard the irritating sound of a motorcycle waking me up every morning. But to this man, it was pure joy. Perhaps it was this joy that helped him survive as long as he did, because he was fighting a battle I knew nothing about. Now, I'm thankful that I never sent that letter that I composed in my head each morning after I researched noise ordinances. In fact, I am actually grateful that he had his beloved Harley, and that he enjoyed it as much as he did. And now I grieve for a man I did not know. Had I at some point taken time to walk across the alley and say hello, perhaps I would have learned of his struggle. I can picture a conversation as he describes his love of motorcycles and race cars. Later, there might have been friendly waves and chats as we went about our lives. I could have been there for his wife, now instead of being a nameless face. My neighbor has no idea of the legacy he left behind. From him, I learned something that has changed my life. He taught me to see others in a different light. We all have our own struggles, frustrations, and issues. I know my own, but it is likely that I will never know the battles of other people I see every day. I can choose to be provoked by circumstance or look deeper and change my perspective. What appears on the surface as simply an annoying situation, an angry person in line, or somebody who cuts me off in traffic, could very well be a person fighting for his or her life. Every day there is an opportunity for me to smile and extend the hand of kindness. I live with plastic toys scattered on the floor and piles of dishes in the sink, and I am always running 5 minutes behind. But I used to be a person who had time to notice others. I realized that I had been so consumed with my own frenzied life that I forgot to look beyond my troubles and be a light to others. Somehow, in opening the door for a stranger or bringing a meal to a friend in need, my own burdens are lighter. I find my children are watching too, and they too are learning how to go about their days, actively finding a way to help others. As my outlook has changed, I am able to see blessings I have all around me that had been there waiting to be discovered all along. Driving in my car, occasionally a Harley will rumble past. My kids in the back seat will cover their ears at the deafening noise, but I simply smile. I have developed a great fondness for those bikes. They have become a reminder that things aren't always as they seem. And this was written by Katie Bengert. And I will just read one more. This one is shorter than the other ones. It's called Fly Me to the Moon. Ralph Waldo Emerson says, "The only person you are destined to become is the person you decide to be." Growing up, I was often described as quiet, docile, reserved, and naive. It was not long until I began to see myself the same way. I trapped myself in this tiny box, buying into everyone else's perception of who I was. Intimidation and fear suppressed my hopes and dreams. I was limiting myself in so many ways. One autumn afternoon during my freshman year in college, I saw a play on campus. It was put on by a group of talented amateur actors, and I found myself in tears at the end of the show. I realized this was not due to the moving performance or because it was such a tragic story. It was simply because I was not on stage with them. My passion for performing could not be ignored any longer. Although I knew I had very few people in my life who truly believed in my ability to pursue something so uncharacteristic of me, the best I could think to do was not to tell anyone until I could prove them wrong. The next week, I found an opportunity to audition for a local play in North Carolina. I was terrified, but I went prepared. I had a headshot, actually my high school senior portrait, and I had memorized a monologue. I got on stage in front of the casting director with my heart beating a mile a minute and delivered my 60-second monologue to the best of my ability. At the end of my performance, the director shook my hand and gave me a script. 5 shows, $150, that's all we can give, he said. I was elated. Not only had I gotten the part, but I was getting paid for it. I was a professional actress. I knew I didn't want to pursue this as a career, but I was not going to let my talent go to waste. I began to wonder what else I was holding myself back from. I gave it a lot of thought and realized that I could go anywhere in the world. I asked myself where that would be, without letting the words impractical or impossible jump into my head. It turned out my dream destination was New York City. Born and raised in a small military town, I was surrounded by people who never lived anywhere else. This was their world. So naturally, when I expressed interest in leaving it, they were discouraging. There were some who blatantly laughed in my face, attempting to remind me who I was. The quiet, docile, reserved, naive girl who would not survive one day in the fast-paced, aggressive New York. Their doubts only furthered my resolve. After graduating, I filled out hundreds of applications for jobs in New York City until I finally received a call for an interview. I was interviewed by 3 stern women wearing business suits. As I sat through the 90-minute meeting, my palms sweating and my heart pounding, I tried to overcome my fear as I had when I performed on stage. But I found myself taking 5 steps backwards. Looking at their unimpressed faces, I stumbled over my words, had mental blanks, and completely failed the interview. I was mortified. I went back home and wept for days. I had never been so humiliated and disappointed in myself. I started to second-guess everything. Was New York the right place for me? Should I just accept what everyone said about me and find a new way to be content? Or should I keep trying and possibly face failure again? I made my decision and distributed my resume to hundreds of New York City employers. To maintain my optimism, I also began hunting for apartments. It took 2 months before I received another phone call for an interview. I prepared myself for the most formidable interviews that I could imagine. But this time, the office environment was completely different. It was casual and laid back, and people smiled and invited me to sit down. Was I still in New York? I had developed this idea that New Yorkers were aggressive, inhospitable, and greedy. Yet here I was, shaking hands with the CFO of the company and having the most pleasant conversation. I was offered the job the next day, and I gladly accepted. When I left my hometown, everyone was genuinely shocked that I was actually making it happen. It was thrilling, but I knew the mature thing to do was not to concern myself with what they thought. Instead, I thanked them for I had used their doubt as fuel. I found an apartment within 2 weeks, and soon I was living in Manhattan. One winter evening, I went to a local coffee shop after work. I brought my laptop with the intent of hunting for part-time acting jobs. As I sipped my coffee and searched the internet, a young girl walked in who reminded me of my 15-year-old self. I wondered what I would say to the teenager in me if she were to come and sit at my table. It would be quite an intervention, I thought. I imagined the younger version of me staring back in awe, surprised at who I had become. I looked at this plump, wide-eyed adolescent and began to preach. First off, you cannot control other people's thoughts or actions, and you cannot allow them to dictate yours. Focus on you. Secondly, do not wait until you are brought to tears by a college play to realize that what you are passionate about. Thirdly, you will experience failure, bad days, even rejection. But that does not mean that you are a failure, a bad person, or a reject. Those moments only exist to make your victories sweeter. As my epiphany came to an end, Frank Sinatra's Fly Me to the Moon came on the coffee shop radio. I was overwhelmed with gratitude as the universe had given me everything I had always wanted. Nothing ever felt so surreal and natural at the same time. I was where I was meant to be, and all I had to do was allow it to happen. And this was written by Anita Taswani. Thanks for joining me for Stories for the Heart, and I'll see you next time. Have a good day.